Hello there everyone, how you doing today? I hope you're all well. Today we're going into r/malicious compliance, where the best revenge is just doing what you're asked. You can watch the building fall later, of course. If you enjoy, like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below with your thoughts on these stories. And without further ado, let's get started, shall we? Call me on a day off? Cha-ching! This happened well over a year ago, but as a unionized employee, I get every third Friday off. On my day off, I am playing some video games and get a text from the boss. I know it's your day off, but whatever, that's easy to ignore. But then I get a second text, and after I ignore that, I get a call. And then the boss says, I know it's your day off, but our phones are down. No worries, I'll handle it. We hang up and I call our phone provider. I'm the IT and the contact here. And this isn't my first call ever to them, so I literally have their service department saved in my phone. I call, register the problem, and they say they'll look into it. I provide them my boss's name and extension, and to call him when it's fixed. I then call my boss back and let them know they'll call him ASAP. But now for the malicious compliance bit. Our contract stipulates a minimum call-in of 4 hours, meaning that you cannot pay me less than 4 hours for a day, unless it's by my own choosing. If you call me in for an hour and then send me home, I get 4 hours of pay. But wait, there's more. We also have an overtime clause that pays overtime at 150%. And lastly, we have a clause that says all overtime must be approved by the boss, or else it is 1-to-1, time off in lieu, which you can take at a 1-to-1 ration. So if I decide that the weekend is a good time for server updates, I don't need to ask for approval, but my 2 hours of work only translates to 2 hours of paid time off elsewhere. Combine all this into one delightful batch and you get a 10-minute call that results in 6 hours of banked time off. I went right back to my video games, filled out my timesheet the week after, and said, I know it's your day off, but is implied consent for overtime. Minimum call out of 4 hours at 150% is 6 hours. Almost an entire day off with pay in exchange for a 10-minute call? Why, thank you very much. Bonus. Guess who has 2 thumbs and has since never been called on his day off? This unionized guy. Here's a hint. Get unionized, fight back. So sue me. Oh, really now? This happened several years ago. I was working 40 hours a week programming at my main job, but I did occasional small projects in the evenings and on weekends for other clients. At one point, I was referred to as a large company that runs major stadiums and event venues around the country. One of their stadiums is relatively close to where I live. I'll call them Mark 1 for the story. So the saga begins. This manager at Mark 1 said they wanted a simple administration database and user interface for employee timekeeping. Apparently the old system they had was not working for them. I got details of what they wanted and drafted a set of specifications. I told them I could write this system to the specs for a $2,000 flat fee. They agreed. I immediately went to work and churned out a database and UI for the system with full documentation in about 2 weeks. So I scheduled an in-person meeting to show them. Now when I showed up at the meeting, someone representing the security department was there, and he asked about getting some additional features. Sure, I told him, I can do that. So I went back, wrote up a change request, and was incorporated the additional features to the platform. I scheduled another meeting with Mark 1 for a couple days later. When we got to the meeting, I noticed the audience had grown. There were 2 extra people from the finance department. Can you add feature X, feature Y, and feature Z, they asked. No problem. So I left, wrote up a CR, and added the features. A few days later, I met with them again. Imagine my surprise when the audience had grown, and the new attendees asked for more features. This went on for about 5 more rounds, and I was getting frustrated that I had spec'd out a 2-week project that was now taking months, and I wouldn't be paid until I delivered and they accepted the final product. But I chugged along, implementing all their change requests. But one day, the Mark 1 manager called me. Apparently, she had been speaking with other departments that weren't represented in her status meeting of ever increasing mass. So he gave me a list of dozens of new features they wanted, some of which would require a complete redesign of the core database and an overhaul of the UI. I had had enough. I told her, this is a complete overhaul of the original spec. I'll have to redesign and rebuild this from the ground up.
Well, that's not my problem,
she responded. Well, actually it is. I'm not going to design and build an entirely new system until you pay me for the current one, built to the specs we agreed on. After a short pause, she dropped a bomb on me.
Well, we're not going to renegotiate. You can consider this project cancelled.
That's not how this works. You still have to pay me for the work I've done.
No, I don't. You haven't delivered anything. Sue me.
And she hung up. Cue the malicious compliance. Meet me at the courthouse. I took Mark 1's manager's advice and went to the courthouse the next day to file in small claims court to recover $2,000 from Mark 1. On my court date a couple of months later, I went down to the courthouse and was greeted by an arbitrator. In my state, they have court-appointed arbitrators meet the litigants when they arrive, to see if the parties can sort out the case with an agreement to maximize the judge's time. The arbitrator asked me, is there anything you would agree to resolve this immediately? I thought about it and said, if they'll pay me 90%, $1,800, right now, I'll drop this suit. He went into a side room where the Mark 1 manager and the corporate lawyer were hanging out. I heard her screaming that they would either pay it all or pay zero. The arbitrator came out to me with the news, and I told him, I heard, and I'm happy to take it all. He laughed and said, no, they want to go to trial. Fast forward a couple of hours. Fast forward is a funny phrase considering how slow the court moved, but hey. And we're standing in front of the judge. I'm at my table alone, and the Mark 1 manager and lawyer are standing at the opposite table. The judge asked Mark 1 manager to tell her side first. She went into a long speech about the project and corporate America and apple pie and thermonuclear weapons. And honestly, I have no clue because I stopped listening about 28 minutes ago. She talked nonstop for about 30 minutes. Then the judge asked me for my story. Now, I wasn't maliciously ignoring Mark 1's manager's long-winded tale of political intrigue and patriotism. I was actually formulating a strategy. I thought to myself the judge probably had people who liked to speechify in front of him all day, every day. I also thought he might appreciate a short and sweet story that got straight to the point and didn't waste his time. So I said, Your Honor, they agreed to pay me $2,000 to design and build a software system for them. I completed the work based on the agreed specs, and they decided to cancel the project after I was done. And then the judge asked me, How do I know you did the work? I had printed out the specs, change requests, documentation, and source code the night before. I lifted a ream of paper, 500 pages, from my table and offered it to the bailiff. Here's the code I wrote for them, Your Honor. The bailiff came to take it from me, and the judge waved him off. No need, I can see it from here. The judge then asked the Mark 1 manager, Is this true? She looked like she was in a daze. Yeah? And then I fined for the plaintiff in the amount of $2,000. Frick you, pay me. And about a month later, Mark 1 still hadn't paid. So I called the county sheriff and explained. Sent him the court judgment documents, and he said, no problem, they'll pay. The sheriff actually called me later that day. He was on his cell phone, and I could hear him talking to the Mark 1 manager. He told her, cut a check for $2,000 right now, or he was going to rip your computers out of the wall and auction them off until the judgment is satisfied. I don't know if he had that authority, but the sheriff seemed to have a grudge against Mark 1, and he was reveling in the opportunity to dog them out. Apparently, Mark 1 believed he had the authority because, long story short, the sheriff had a $2,000 check in his hand about 15 minutes later, and it was in my mailbox about a week later. So take notes of everything you say in the meeting. Okay, but it will get you fired. So this happened a few years ago, and I'll be vague since I'm still not sure if the dust has fully settled from this fiasco yet. At my former company, I was the secretary for a small improvement team that would meet monthly to discuss issues within the company and brainstorm ways to fix them. Something you need to know about me is that I was given this role because people know I am meticulous at keeping records due to HR-related issues I had at a previous place of employment. I don't think my boss realized that this careful record keeping applied to her as well, especially when she appointed me to be a secretary of this little committee, but I digress. I was a model employee, also known as award-winning, and went above and beyond what was asked, as were many others in my department. But we were having customer complaints and dealt with regular safety issues, due to the company at large and through no fault of our own. When we brought these concerns to our boss's attention, emails were left unread, and during in-person exchanges we were called whiny and needy, and we were just told we needed to just deal with it, whatever the issue, from items being stolen by customers to people being unhappy with the procedures the boss had set down for us to follow. It was always made to somehow be our fault. When we sought support from other departments, we were met with cold indifference, since the boss was great to them and we must be exaggerating the things she said to us. Well, during an improvement meeting at the end of the fiscal year, it all came to a head. Myself and a couple of my team members dug our heels in and were insistent about the unresolved issues the boss refused to acknowledge, and she finally went off on us. She told us everyone was incompetent, didn't deserve our jobs, and that maybe customers would like us more if we were more likable. When people pressed her on safety issues, she continued to reiterate that we would just have to deal with it, and that if someone was going to die, they already would have, right? I, as the secretary, did my duty and took notes of all that happened over the course of that meeting. I usually did bullet points, but that night I was feeling a little more thorough, so I wrote down words, every single word that was said, every hateful comment, denial of accountability, and idle threat was recorded in black and white. Now, a second part of my job is to distribute the notes from the improvement meeting to the rest of the company. So come the next morning, I ran about 100 copies of the transcript of the meeting and hand-delivered to every single department in the building. And things blew up. People from other departments who had attended the meeting were able to verify that everything I had said was really true. And folks were mad, threatening to quit, refusing to do their normal duties, browsing Indeed during work, and so on. My boss's boss, who worked at HQ, so I didn't get the opportunity to hand her a copy, got wind of these meeting minutes only a few hours after I handed them out, and had an hour-long off-the-record conversation with me about all the safety issues I had documented, all the concerns I had submitted to management in writing, and all the concerns I had regarding my boss's inaction. She was very grateful for the 100 pages of documentation I sent over and thanked me for my time. The day after I unleashed Pandora's box, I put in my 2 weeks' notice and took a new job and pieced out to greener pastures. At first, it seemed like things were calming down, but after I left, the following year, the company did not renew my boss's contract. I still feel a bit bad because I wasn't trying to get her fired or ruin her life. I was just desperate for some accountability thrown her way to create some positive change in the company. But at the end of the day, I just did what she asked me to do. Don't threaten me with a good time. A lot of lawyers are making the news with their bad decisions, which reminded me of a story I hope you enjoy. I had an appearance for a pretrial hearing in a small town court. The hearing went okay for my client. The other attorney did not strongly positively or negatively, which made sense, because the decision was basically a 60-40 split of what we were disputing. Neither of us was a big winner or loser. His demeanor changed drastically after the judge dismissed us. In the hallway, he stomped up to me while I was discussing the next steps with my client and said, "We needed to talk." I said something along the lines of, "As soon as I'm done with my client." The guy huffed off and I finished my talk. To set the stage for this next part, I am mostly average for height and weight. The guy was probably 4 inches taller, 60 pounds heavier, and 30-ish years my senior. Imagine a big belly drinker's nose and some flop sweat if he saw the elevator was out of service. So I said goodbye to my client and walked over. Without any small talk, he gave me something close to,
"You think you could just walk in here and act like that?"
This was confusing because nothing really went great or terrible for me, or for him. So I said something like, "Act like what?" And this really sets him off, and I pinky swear he was trying to antagonize him with that question. He says verbatim,
"You better hope I never see you outside this court, because I'll kick the shit out of you."
What he did not know was that I really enjoy fighting. After seeing Power Rangers punch those clay soldiers, I begged my parents for karate classes. After that was judo in high school, BJJ in college, and an attempt to fight in UFC after college. I thought I was tough right until the actual professionals hit me. Then I thought, wow, I'm a huge wimp, and went for a graduate degree. So I told him, "Sounds good, we need to sign some forms first though. Here's my availability. Let's find a time and meet up at the gym. Do you want boxing or grappling gloves?" I thought for sure he would make an excuse, but he agreed. So we set up a time and everything. The small town court gossip mill did its thing, and a couple of court staff showed up to watch the fight. In an anticlimactic turn of events, the guy was a no-call, no-show. The next time he and I appeared before the judge, who did not show up to watch the fight, the judge made a snarky comment like, "Is this really worth fighting over?" And he didn't have anything to say to that. Anyway, that's the end of today's video. I hope you all enjoyed. Remember to like, subscribe, leave a comment down below, and all that good stuff. Maybe hit the notification bell. I will see you all next time. Hasta la pasta.